Well, a shakeup at McDonald's is shaking the stock up today. And how? CEO Steve Easterbrook out after admitting to a consensual relationship with a subordinate. Grady Trimble is outside McDonald's headquarters in Chicago with the fast-moving developments. Grady.
Neil, Easterbrook is out, and we also learned today that the head of HR for McDonald's is leaving as well, although the company wouldn't say whether that's related to Easterbrook's departure. Meanwhile, Easterbrook is not leaving empty-handed. His severance package includes 6 months of pay in cash, which amounts to about $675,000. He'll also be able to cash out on a huge chunk of company stock worth around $37 million, according to Bloomberg. And as part of that severance package, he won't be able to work for competitors for 2 years. Easterbrook has acknowledged he made a mistake in an email to McDonald's employees. He also admits to having a consensual relationship with a fellow employee. McDonald's wouldn't say which rule he broke, but the company website clearly outlines its policy on dating. It says employees can't have a relationship with another employee who reports to them either directly or indirectly. McDonald's reiterated that this decision was not related to the financial performance of the company. In fact, it's done quite well under Easterbrook. The stock doubled while he was a CEO. He started as CEO back in 2015. Now his replacement has already been named. His name is Chris Kempczinski. He was previously in charge of all U.S. operations for McDonald's. Neil?
Grady Trimble, thank you very much, my friend. So essentially it comes down to this. Kicked in the buns, even as he sold a record number of buns, and lots of other stuff at McDonald's. But for Steve Easterbrook, it is over. And all for doing something former McDonald's USA CEO Ed Renzi says is clearly spelled out in the company handbook.
Anytime a superior officer of the company is dating a subordinate, that has an adverse effect on everybody around them, because other people in the company say, is that person getting an advantage because of the relationship with the boss? What's going on? And it's just inappropriate. And in this day and age, it is just unthinkable that anybody would do that. Everybody gets hurt. The stockholders got hurt today. The employees got hurt. The reputation got hurt.
All right. What's odd is that this type of a policy is listed on most of the Fortune 500 handbooks, company handbooks. Washington Examiner's David Drucker, Market Watcher Scott Martin, and Heather Zumaraga. Heather, this is standard corporate policy. Now, obviously, people fall in love in the workplace all the time, but this is in the policy book. It's a big no-no. What do you make of it?
Okay, yes, it is in the policy book, and maybe it's been in the policy book for 20 years. But if there was a consequence for Mr. Easterbrook, if this was consensual, then in my opinion, there should also be a consequence for the female employee as well. Well,
we don't know the full story there. We're still waiting to find out. But Scott Martin, obviously, great success with the company. Doesn't really matter if something like this comes up. I mean, his successor is going to implement many of the same things that Mr. Easterbrook had implemented: faster drive-through, more technology-driven restaurants, etc. So it doesn't change in that regard. But what do you make of all this?
Well, I mean, it might be tough, Neil. You know, with respect to replication of what Mr. Easterbrook did, it might be hard. I mean, this guy was a revolutionary. All-day breakfast changed the face of fast food. Neil, they have frozen Coke, frozen Coca-Cola at a lot of McDonald's nowadays, one of the best drinks on the planet. He may be hard to get those ideas through again, whoever succeeds him, because of the fact that Mr. Easterbrook was so good at his job.
You know, it's interesting, David, but maybe in the Me Too movement, none of that matters. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention developments at the company from where I'm reporting now. It doesn't matter. This stuff does, right?
Yeah, it's fraught with too much political peril, Neil, whether in the corporate world or in politics. You know, in the past couple of years in Congress, they've implemented rules barring relationships with subordinates. It doesn't matter if it's consensual, if it's something that both feel is a positive. If you're doing it, it's wrong, and you can be brought up on ethics charges. And in corporate America, there is now so much focus from an advertising perspective, from a public perspective, on the interworkings of what corporate executives and their subordinates are doing. I think this is just, it's too dangerous in a sense for corporations to ignore, even when somebody like Mr. Easterbrook is doing his job so well.
You know, the argument that you had in the past with politicians who've run afoul of this sort of thing, Heather, is that by and large they can survive it. It's a little harder for those in corporate America. It's just odd, you know. And not all the time
yeah,
on the
maybe
political side, you know, but go ahead.
I hear you, but in corporate culture, things are changing. I'm writing a book on this very topic about gender issues in the workplace, a sort of man's guide to corporate culture. And it is making it tough for, say, married couples, according to Business News Daily. 22% of people who are married met in the workplace. When you spend so much time with people you work with, it's hard. 58% was another statistic by Vault saying that employees have had an office romance in the workplace. So how do you nip that in the butt just because you have these corporate policies? You have a lot of successful marriages that have resulted from workplace relationships.
Well, it works both ways, right? Scott Martin, I mean, obviously this congresswoman had to resign in the middle of much the same type of a situation, not here, but where you know, she was taking advantage potentially you know, of male colleagues. So if the Me Too thing is going to include both sexes,
but the difference is it consensual?
Well, yeah, that's
consensual.
true.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, I hear you. Go ahead.
That's true, Heather, but to your point earlier, I mean, these days, and not that I know a lot about these things, but there's a lot of apps out there, boys and girls, where you can find people to date or hook up with or maybe even marry. So to say that this is something that only occurs in the workplace or where you meet all these people, get married, let's face it, there's people out there looking to get married to people all the time. You don't need to find them sitting across the cube from you.
David, maybe you can add some reason to what Scott just said.
Yeah, look, it's hard to legislate, as I like to say from where I am, it's hard to legislate human behavior. It's hard to create rules that are going to police human behavior. You work closely with somebody politically in the business world, you tend to develop bonds, relationships, and sometimes these things run afoul of the rules. I think in the age in which we're living and working in, people are simply going to have to make adjustments about which jobs they hold and how important these relationships are. Stockholders, politicians, rule makers are simply too fearful of the blowback that can happen if they look past something because they think it's innocent enough and it turns out it was a big problem.
All right, guys.
That's the bottom line, is that regardless, even if it's consensual, it's still, you can't date anybody you work with.
All right, look at the time, Heather. All right, thank you very, very much. You'll never get to the bottom of this, but I will say this. We'll keep repeating this. I see it all the time. Meanwhile, could medical